The 14th of September, 2023, Las Vegas, Nevada. The sun is setting behind the Spring Mountains. Neon lights begin flickering to life along the Las Vegas Strip. Slot machines continue ringing with the sound of jackpots. Champagne continues to flow. Dice continue to roll. On the surface, everything looks completely normal. But inside a conference room at Caesars Entertainment, nobody sees it that way anymore. Just minutes earlier, a message appeared on a screen. Short, cold, emotionless. We have your data. We want money. It was the moment Caesars realized the worst had already happened. The intrusion was over. The heist was complete. The attackers were no longer trying to get in. They were preparing to leave. And they were taking the most valuable thing with them: data. Millions of customer records, millions of identities, millions of reasons to keep corporate lawyers awake at night. Now, only one question remained. If a criminal group is holding your company's most valuable asset hostage, what do you do? Call the FBI? Fight back? Or pay? It was a multi-million-dollar question, and Caesars was about to make its choice. The problem is, no business school teaches you how to handle a situation like this. No MBA program has a course on negotiating with hackers. No shareholder meeting prepares you for the moment a criminal group tells you they're holding your data hostage. Because in theory, the answer is always simple. Don't negotiate with criminals. Don't pay ransom demands. Don't encourage future attacks. That's the advice almost every cybersecurity expert will give. But reality is always more complicated. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that a group of hackers is holding your customer records, millions of records, personal information, phone numbers, email addresses, identity documents, maybe even your most sensitive data. Then, a message appears. Short, cold, emotionless. We have your data. Do you want it back? At that moment, the debate changes. This is no longer a technology problem. It's a business problem, a legal problem, a reputation problem, a customer trust problem, a stock price problem, and sometimes a survival problem. For years, cybersecurity experts have argued over this question. Some believe paying is a mistake, because every dollar sent funds the next attack. Every successful ransom payment creates another incentive for another hacking group to try again. But others see the issue differently. If paying gets the company back online faster, if paying prevents sensitive data from being released, if paying avoids hundreds of millions of dollars in damages, is it really the wrong decision? Nobody has a perfect answer. And that's exactly the situation Caesars was about to face. One of the largest casino companies in America, a multi-billion-dollar brand, a company with millions of customers. And somewhere in the shadows, a group of hackers had just found a way inside. Caesars didn't know it yet. Tourists didn't know it either. Las Vegas still glowed beneath its sea of neon lights. The poker tables were still full. The slot machines were still ringing. Everything looked completely normal. But in just a few days, a question would arrive in a Caesars boardroom. A question nobody wanted to hear. A question worth millions of dollars. If the hackers demand money, do we pay them or not? Bank robberies are usually easy to recognize. Glass shatters, alarms blare, people run. There's a moment when everyone understands that something has just happened. But the biggest heists of the 21st century look completely different. No gunshots, no masks, no one vaulting over a teller counter, not a single dollar stuffed into a bag. Because in the digital world, you can steal an entire vault without ever touching the lock. And that is exactly what Caesars was beginning to realize. Somewhere inside its systems, a stranger had walked through hallways no outsider was ever supposed to enter, opened doors that didn't belong to him, switched on lights inside rooms that were meant to stay dark, read files that were never intended for outside eyes. And the most frightening part was that nobody knew how long he had been there. An hour, a day, maybe an entire week. It's like waking up in the middle of the night and finding muddy footprints across your floor. You're not just afraid of the intruder. You're afraid of everything he may have done before you even knew he existed. Then the message arrived. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't written in capital letters. Just a few lines of text so cold, they felt almost emotionless. But their weight was like a stone thrown into a perfectly still lake. The ripples began to spread. First, the security team. Then the lawyers. Then the executives. Then the board of directors. Each ripple larger than the one before it. Each person entering the room carrying a different fear. The engineers feared losing their systems. The lawyers feared lawsuits. The CFO feared financial damage. The CEO feared losing customer trust. But all of them feared the same thing, whatever the attackers might be holding. Then, the first proof arrived. Not the entire dataset, just fragments. A few records, a few names, a few numbers. But sometimes a single piece is enough to reveal the whole puzzle. Like finding a drop of blood on the floor. You don't need to see the entire crime scene to know something terrible has happened. The room fell silent. Not the silence of peace. The silence that appears when everyone realizes the true scale of the problem at exactly the same moment. Because by then, the crisis was no longer hypothetical. It had a shape. It had evidence. It had weight. And most importantly, it had a price tag. For years, Caesars had built its empire on a simple promise. Give us your data. We'll protect it. Now that promise sat on the table like a stack of poker chips worth billions of dollars. And someone had just shoved the entire pile into the center of the bet. That was the moment everything changed. Because from that point forward, this was no longer a security incident. No longer a technical investigation. No longer a problem for engineers. This was a hostage negotiation. With one important difference. The hostages weren't people. They were data. Millions of records. Millions of identities. Millions of reasons why Caesars couldn't simply stand up and walk away from the table. And on the other side of that table, Scattered Spider was waiting. Patient, calm, confident. Like poker players who know they're holding the strongest hand in the room. The problem with extortion negotiations is that they never begin with money. They begin with fear. The fear that the data will be exposed. The fear that customers will lose trust. The fear that years spent building a reputation could disappear with a single press release. And now all of those fears were sitting around the same table. Lawyers, cybersecurity experts, executives, board members, people who had spent their entire careers managing risk. But this time, the risk wasn't sitting inside a spreadsheet. It was sitting on the other side of the conversation. No one in the room wanted to pay, at least not at first. Paying criminals violated every principle they believed in. It was like paying a burglar to politely return your house keys after breaking into your home. There was no contract, no guarantee, no customer service department, only the promise of people who had already demonstrated that they were willing to break the law for money. But then, another question emerged. What happens if we don't pay? The question hung in the room like cigarette smoke. Nobody wanted to be the first person to answer it, because everyone understood how enormous the consequences could be. Millions of customer records, identity data, internal company information, intangible assets that had taken years to accumulate. In the modern world, data is like oil. It's not just valuable. It's what powers the entire machine. and Caesars had just discovered that someone was standing next to its fuel depot holding a box of matches. Experts began laying out scenarios. What happens if the data is released? Lawsuits, federal investigations, legal expenses, public relations disasters, customers abandoning the brand. Enterprise value eroding day after day. The list kept growing, and every line ended with numbers that became larger and larger. That is the paradox of ransomware. The attackers almost always demand a sum that sounds enormous, but they also make sure it remains smaller than the damage the victim is imagining in their head. They don't sell data. They sell fear. And sometimes, fear is the most expensive product in the world. While the debate continued inside that room, Las Vegas carried on as if nothing had happened. Dealers continued working the tables, cocktails continued flowing, slot machines continued ringing with jackpots. Tourists kept taking photos beneath the neon lights, completely unaware that somewhere behind the scenes, a multi-million-dollar decision was being weighed minute by minute. Then, something strange happened. The discussion began to change. It was no longer a debate about ethics. No longer a debate about whether paying criminals was right or wrong. It became a calculation, a cold calculation. If we pay, how much do we lose? If we don't pay, how much do we lose? That was the moment everyone in the room realized they had entered a different kind of casino. No dice, no roulette wheel, no blackjack table, just probabilities, risk, and millions of dollars sitting in the middle of the table. The irony was impossible to ignore. Caesars had been built on people who loved to gamble. For decades, the company had made its money by managing risk better than its customers. But now Caesars was the one sitting down at the table. And for the first time in a very long time, it didn't know what the next card would be. Finally, after hours of debate, a decision was made. There was no applause, no sense of victory. Nobody in the room believed they had found the perfect solution, because the perfect solution didn't exist. There were only options that were less bad than the alternatives. And Caesars chose one of them. They would pay. Millions of dollars would be transferred in the hope that the crisis could be stopped before it became a public catastrophe. But that was something no one could guarantee. Because in the world of ransomware, money doesn't buy truth. Money doesn't buy trust. Money buys hope. And sometimes, hope is the most expensive thing a company can ever purchase. MGM refused to pay. Caesars agreed to pay. One chose to fight. One chose to negotiate. One lost nearly $100 million to operational disruption. The other transferred millions of dollars into the shadows, hoping the crisis would disappear. At first glance, these look like two completely different strategies. But months later, both discovered the same uncomfortable truth. Neither could be certain they had actually won. MGM could never be sure that the stolen data wouldn't surface somewhere in the future. Caesars could never be sure that the data had truly been deleted. Because in the world of ransomware, there are no receipts. There are no contracts. There are no warranties. When you pay a hacker, the only thing you receive is the promise of the very person who attacked you. And that is a fragile foundation on which to build peace of mind. Perhaps that is the most frightening part of the entire story. Not the money, not the data, not the teenage hackers, but the uncertainty. The uncertainty about what was taken, the uncertainty about what may still be out there, the uncertainty about whether the crisis truly ended or simply disappeared from the headlines. For years, companies believed every problem could be solved with more resources, more technology, more experts, more money. But Caesars learned a different lesson. Some problems cannot be fully solved with money. Money can buy time. Money can buy temporary silence. Money can buy an opportunity to recover. But money cannot buy certainty. And in the modern world of cybercrime, Certainty may be the most expensive luxury of all. That is why, years after the attack, the debate still hasn't ended. Did Caesars make the right decision? Maybe. Did Caesars make the wrong decision? Maybe. But that's exactly the problem. No one truly knows. And perhaps no one ever will. Because sometimes the most frightening question isn't, what did they take? It's, do they still have it?